Let us now look to the complete opposite of Poussin and Lorraine. So Poussin was like grand ideas, grand people, grand subject matter. And then there was Lorraine, who in his landscape, what we saw was just like pretty and beautiful, idyllic, picturesque. I didn't even talk about it in my Lorraine video, but like we didn't see any concerns for like bugs or mud or trash, garbage littering the landscape. Instead, it was just like beauty and perfection, right? Well, that is the complete opposite of what we're going to look at now. Instead, we're going to look at the peasant life. Now, peasantry in France during the Baroque period, it was tough. It was really, really hard. 90%, a little bit more than 90% of the population in France were of the peasant class. And that was to live literally dirt poor because there was this corrupt system of inadequate or unequal tax system of wealth to maintain the luxuries and the riches and the refined culture of the king and the nobility and the Catholic Church. They heavily taxed the peasant class. And the peasant class in France most likely were illiterate, meaning they could not read. Their life was to be born, work, and die. And most French peasants, they were born in their towns, their villages. They did back-breaking labor, and all of their hard work, all of their food, all of their resources would be paid as taxes to the rich, to the wealthy, to the nobility, and they would be left with literal scraps of food and scraps of all of their hard work, their textile work, their craftsmanship. It sounds bleak. We're going to look at a painting now of the peasant class in France during the reign of Louis XIV. This is the artwork. This is by the artist Louis Nain, and the title is Family of Country People. What we see is a typical French peasant family. We have the father, the mother, and then let's count how many kids they have here. 1, 2, 3 that are standing around the fire. 4. She's not one of their kids. We'll talk about her in a bit. 5, 6. So 6 very young children. And then we got a kitty cat and a dog. Now, what are we doing in this space? Well, we're watching them as they are about to have dinner. Dinner? Yeah. This small pot is filled with soup. The father holds a loaf of brown bread, and the mother is pouring a small glass of wine. Now let me give you a little bit more context. Typical meal for a French peasant at this time. I know French food is like, proclaimed as the best in the world. That's not this. That is not what these people are enjoying. A typical French peasant meal was a stew of meager vegetables, a very thin, watery stew. You might be thinking, well, why not some meat? Why don't you add some meat in there? Guess what? There was a tax on meat, and most people of the peasantry could not afford meat on a regular basis. And they wouldn't want to go kill all of their chickens because then they wouldn't have any eggs. So a typical meal was a very thin root vegetable soup. And then he's holding a loaf of brown bread. Brown bread. It's extremely hard bread. And the only way it's edible is by soaking it in your thin soup broth. Why brown bread? Where's all those fancy, baguettes that we know about France? What about croissants? No. In terms of taxation, wheat or grain was divided into the more refined, processed white flour that was taxed, paid to the wealthy. and the peasant class was left with a very rough, hard, grainy brown grains, and it created these hard, dense brown loaves. So yeah, that fancy white bread is there, but it's for the nobility, it's for the church, it's for the king. Here we also see the mother is holding a small carafe of red wine. Now you might be thinking, French wine, ooh la la, ça très bien. No, no, no. Yes, French wine is celebrated as wonderful, but what she's drinking here is watered down wine, and she's going to be serving that to the family from that very limited amount in that small carafe because the water is not potable. It's dangerous to drink the drinking water, or it's dangerous to drink the water because of the runoff from the farms. It's not potable. So it's the only safe thing for everybody to drink. And there's not a lot of it for this entire family. So we're meant to, what Nain wants us to do is he wants us to walk around the space, to feel like we have been invited by the peasant family into the room with them. And what we see are the items of their house. We see this large fireplace, and we see the kids warming themselves at the fire. The mother and father look out at us, the viewer, as if pausing before they begin their meal. On the table, we see an empty bowl, so we assume that they haven't yet had their meal. Look at, he's even got his knife out and he's about to cut into the loaf. There's a candlestick holder, but without a candle on the table. Perhaps it's because there's light coming through. That light that's streaming into the space, illuminating their faces. Maybe it's an open window. So they don't need the candlelight. They're not going to be wasteful. Candles are expensive. And so they're being very frugal in that they're not lighting this meal with any kind of unnecessary candlelight. Instead, they're going to let the natural light come in. And then we see a basket and this woman here. Now, the items that are strewn around are meant to help us understand what they have. What they have is food. What they have is a warm place, a fire. The floor, it's not a tile floor or a wood floor. That's way too crazy expensive. Instead, a typical peasant house would be a tamped down dirt floor. And that's what we see here. So we see this dirt floor. It's all tamped down. And who's this woman? Well, in reality, we could tell by her distinct hair headpiece and her teal skirt and her apron. This is kind of like a uniform. This is a uniform that would help us identify her as a charity worker who has brought the food here for the family. In terms of context, because the peasant class was suffering so much, the nobility and the king thought, oh, how can we help them? Should we lessen the taxes and have less money? Oh, no, 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 no. Instead, what they did is they instituted this charity, and this charity system would go around the French countryside, and it would be feeding the poor. And so it would make the wealthy feel good about their kind of helping the peasant class by giving them these small, meager meals. So she is a charity worker who has come and dropped off in that basket the bread and the soup and the wine for this family to enjoy. Okay, now let me ask you, who is this painting for? Who's going to buy this painting? Who wants to see this painting? Are the peasants going to buy this painting and put it up on their wall? No. The people who want to see this are the wealthy, the nobility. This isn't for the peasant class. This is for the nobility, the virtuous nobility. It's to make them feel better about themselves. They look at this painting and they think, see, look at how wonderful, how helpful we are. They're fine. They're fine. Yes, yes, they're extremely poor. Yes, they often starve to death. Yes, they don't know how to read. Yes, there is no hope of education to better themselves. But that's okay. Look at them. They're so simple. They wouldn't know what to do with an education. They wouldn't know what to do with all that money and all that food. Look at what we've done. We've given them charity. This woman here, giving them the food. They're fine. Look at this husband and wife have 6 kids and they all look healthy. Yeah, they're in rags, but you know, they wouldn't know what to do with a fancy dress and jewels. They have a clean place to sleep. They're smart with their money, right? They're not gonna blow it on useless candles like I do all the time. They're fine. This painting is meant to assuage the guilt and obvious injustice of the nobility, of the king, of his princes and princesses and barons and dukes, and it makes them feel better for their exploitation. This is art that is giving you a specific message to maintain their power. An examination of this by historians would be to say that they are, simply put, displaying the nature of peasant class. Look at them. They're so simple. If I gave them more money, they wouldn't know what to do with it. This is where they belong. This is what a peasant does. Now, if this makes you feel uncomfortable, it should. I want this painting to make you feel uncomfortable. I want you to feel the injustice of this artwork, the imbalance of power and wealth, because as we continue through this semester, we're going to see this constant struggle, and it's going to rise into revolution. Got it? Okay. Let's continue forward.